Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Opting Out. Opt out. We're going to do things a little bit differently this time. Usually I do the intro kind of just before I, jump into it with our guest, but I always let God lead. So today we had things done a bit differently. So I am going to do kind of an intro and then we'll jump into the interview that I did. Today we had Mr. Jefferson Moore as our guest today. If you guys have not heard of him yet, you need to. He's amazing. He is an actor and a producer. He has his own film studio, and he has produced some really amazing films that has really impacted my life and where I'm at. And honestly, I've heard had a great following as well. My favorite is The Perfect Stranger. So you guys Google that. It is on Filmworks. It is on Amazon, and check it out. But in the meantime, he has agreed to come on our podcast and just talk with me about his film studio and what his inspiration has been, what it's like making movies, what it's like being an actor and director. Just some really neat things, as well as some things that he has going on with all the different changes that are going on in this world that are happening to all of us. So it's really neat to hear his perspective, along with just kind of seeing how it relates to all the things that we all go through. So I'm excited for you guys to watch this, to see this. Guys, definitely check him out. He's amazing, and his films are great. One of the things that I love as a highlight from that was that he doesn't make Christian film. He makes something that is relatable and able to be digested and enjoyed. So it's definitely a good descriptor of what I have seen. So that being said, enjoy. Thanks so much for being here. And I pray each and every one of you who watch this, whenever you watch this, will be able to get something valuable out of it, because you know how God is. He has a way of doing things in ways that we do not expect. So love all of you. And we're so glad you're here wherever you are. And we will jump right in. I wanted to ask you about your, I guess, you have a whole production studio, you do your own movies, you do your own distribution, it seems, right?
Yeah, we own all the rights to everything that we've ever produced. So yeah, we are our own distributors, and we work with sub-distributors to get our things out there. So yeah, we've been independent from day one. Yeah.
That is so smart. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like I should bring it up. One of the things that I was enjoying, The Chosen. Have you had a chance to come across that yet?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I actually, Dallas is a friend. Dallas actually helped us get our start, kind of in a backwards way. Dallas's dad, his dad, right?
Okay, so
yeah, so the way back when, again, probably before you were born. I'm just assuming because you look really young. So
I'll take it.
Really young. The production company that got the rights to do the movie of the Left Behind books was based here in Louisville. Mm-hmm. And we kind of went to church together. We weren't really good friends. But anyway, Dallas, actually, since he was actually here in Louisville working as their intern. So all the interaction I had with that company, I did a couple of vids for them. All the interaction I had with him, I met Dallas through that. He was pretty much the flunky. So then, he grew up and moved away and stuff and started making movies. So we really kind of stayed in touch. So when we made our first film, when we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't know how you got distribution or anything. It was about 10 months, and we just gotten a bunch of no's and a bunch of no's and a bunch of no's. And I knew that Dallas was out in LA at the time. And I said, Dallas, can you help me out? I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm good at getting rejections, but and he says, well, you really need a rep. Mm. And I said, never thought about that. So he gave us a guy that he trusted, and that guy got us our first deal, and everything else happened from there. And so, literally, I would be asking you if you wanted fries right now instead of doing an interview about my studio if it weren't for Dallas. So
that's amazing. He's a part of your history.
He's a good guy. He's really down to earth, and he's just an all around good guy. He walks the walk, and he's still fun, and he doesn't have, there's not two Dallases, there's just one Dallas.
Right, the same one. I ran into him once. It's funny how that happened. So we ran into The Chosen on Pureflix, and I was just like, whoa, this is so awesome. And I mean, the way they were doing the pay it forward and the way it was, they wanted to spread it. And I just saw God really moving in that. And so we what do you call it? We donated or sponsored or however you call it, you know, we did a sponsor level, and then they did a grand, oh, not a grand opening, they did a showing of their Christmas episode last November. And we were like, oh, we can be in DC for then. And so we got to go. We actually brought the whole family, including the children. We went to the showing, and then I stayed behind and got to kind of say hey and shake hands. And you could tell us very excited. It was kind of like a movie opening they did for the Christmas episode that they did. But yeah, so I got to kind of run into him and very shortly shake his hand, say he's doing awesome and totally impactful. But yeah, he seemed, he's, you know, the very down to earth, a lot of supporters, people who know him, very, very laid back, which is really cool. So, so yeah, well, that's really neat.
What they pulled off was amazing.
Yes, I agreed. And are you involved in that project at all?
We invested a little bit at the beginning just so I could have a front row seat to seeing things. So outside of that, no, it's he doesn't need me. That's for sure.
It's funny just how things orbit though, right? How our orbits just kind of come around each other. And I just like what you're doing. And honestly, I'd love to see your stuff, especially the stranger stuff. Like, I don't know, put out there so much more, because I love watching Jesus themed things, especially set in, you know, today's and how people see things today. I love it. I'm very drawn to it because a lot of people are curious. And with the way you do it, I love the apologetics part of it, you know, but then also still kind of the relational part of it as well that you bring out, which I haven't really seen and I haven't seen a bunch, but you know, between the couple I have seen, like the Encounter series, if you have not seen it, and I think it's made by or distributed by Filmworks, but they have a whole couple of movies and a series that they did that shows kind of some interaction similar to yours, but after yours, right? So it might have even been inspired. Right. And I actually wondered the other day, was one of your episodes of The Stranger, was it did it inspire The God's Not Dead, right?
Yeah, we actually had to check on that. We actually checked on that. Somebody kind of brought that to our attention and said, okay, we'll check it out. I'm like, okay, well, we won't go down that rabbit hole. So yeah.
Right, but yeah, because I was like, it seems like it was inspired by it. I don't know if you guys were connected or if you guys are, you know, or anything like that. But yes, I was like, wait a minute, this seems very, very familiar.
Yeah, we heard that from a few people.
Well, just a minute, but you were doing it first, and it seems like it's created this whole neat expansion of people kind of playing with that. But I'd love to know what inspired you to do that. I mean, to take that on, to play the role of Jesus. That's huge.
It just happened. Nothing was really planned. It was just like an unfolding. Just like your life is unfolded. It's just something that was in front of me. And we kind of said, let's just kind of, I'm big. I'm not much of a go-getter, and I'm really not much of a visionary. I tend to pull the oars in a lot and just see what the current's doing, because the current knows more than I do. And that was one such case. You know, I had read this book somebody gave me as a gift, and I'm not even an avid reader. And you know, I read the book and I said, wow, that just really impressed upon me a good way of explaining things, and things kind of progressed from there. I said, you know, this would be a good, you know, for people to use to talk to people. And I thought, oh, this would make a nice film. This would kind of be kind of cool. You're really drawn into this kind of dialogue. Speaking about our first movie, how it happened, and it did. It really resonated with people, and you know, we kind of built on that with a few more projects.
So the first one was The Stranger, the dinner one. That was the first movie.
Yeah, that was one based on the book I received.
Cool. Okay, I wasn't sure which one came first. I didn't really look too much at the dates or the production, but that's kind of what you'd said to do first. And did the production studio come before or after the movie?
As far as being in business, as far as Kelly's Filmworks, I had quit my real job. about a couple of years earlier and started acting full time. And then I kind of got, I was in a pilot out of LA and did some other things. And then I got interested in working behind the camera and doing some writing. So I think, we had started acquiring some equipment probably about 2 years before we did Perfect Stranger. So, I started getting my feet wet with some smaller projects and whatnot. And I was still, very much of a working actor. So, so that was probably our first marketable effort, was the Perfect Stranger. But the studio was in place before that.
That is so neat. Yes, I
Yeah.
always hear about how hard it is to do any of those things. And it sounds like it just all kind of fell into place.
Well, we had no money, we had no experience, we had very little help, a lot of borrowed equipment. So it's kind of, well, all right. So nobody was more surprised at the success of it than we were. Especially knowing where it came from. Somebody said, well, we'll do it. If we have to, we'll sell it out of the back of a van, and try to get some of this back, because we had a lot of wheeling and dealing going on to get it made. And then when it turned out to just catch on the way it did, and those first few broadcasts we had, and we had a theatrical run as well.
Wow.
And so we're so surprised at the response to it. We weren't ready for it. Like I said, we weren't on some holy mission to where we're going to spread the gospel to the mountaintops. We were making a film.
Mm-hmm.
When we first made the first Perfect Stranger, I mean, we did not see it as this awakening of the gospel, although that was a great story. We saw it as an independent film that people would find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If you look up an art house, we saw it as an art house movie.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it as, along the lines of My Dinner with Andre,
Mm-hmm.
which was really popular amongst the eggheads and the
Mm-hmm.
independent people.
Mm-hmm.
My dog Butkus is in the house. If you hear footsteps, that's him. And so that's kind of how we envisioned it. And it really caught on with people, believers and non-believers as well. And I think we were more surprised by the non-believers that really took to the portrayal, and took to, the content that was in it, that we said, okay, well, the churchy people are going to like it, of course. It was the people that said, hey, I'd never heard it explained this way before. Or the people that said, if I'd heard it this way, I wouldn't have left the church, because the church just made me feel bad. It made me feel like, like a criminal.
Yep, it's true.
So we were really surprised, and when it caught on, and then, we were getting all this feedback, and the movie was selling in any outlet could it be sold. It was getting sold, and people were wanting to license it, and chain stores were wanting to pick it up. And I kept wanting to say, do you know we did this on a borrowed camera? And we were like working like 16-hour days, because we didn't know you can't do that. And I was literally wearing a borrowed suit. Do you guys know that? And people didn't seem to care.
It probably makes it more like you enjoy it more. I love Dad's background. It reminds me of Gideon, right? You can't really take credit when something works out just so perfectly.
No, you really can't. And we really never have. We really never have. We said, that it just shows that that it's a timeless message that's kind of deep within all of us. And when you hear it with the right ears, it's familiar to you. And I think that's kind of what happened with it. It's like his story's gonna resonate no matter who's doing it, because it's a simple story. It's not complicated. The points he makes are, like I said, it's not like getting a law degree, believing the gospel, not like getting a law degree. You really got to be smart to do this. You really got no, it's a simple message that resonates with everybody with a pulse when they have the ears to hear it. Yeah.
And I think that's what made yours so special, like especially the first one. It was like you said, it did have kind of that independent artsy feel to it. You didn't do a whole lot of extra, you just really let it, the characters and
we had no money for extra.
Well, that'll also contribute to it too. But it's really, it focuses, doesn't distract. And I feel like a lot of the stuff, even some of the independent stuff, and I've kind of been a bit out of touch for a little while now when it comes to what's in and everything, even being in Austin, like I said, backyard, right? I've never gone to any of the independent film festivals or any South by. I've never been to it. or ACL, but I'd say it was neat hearing what you chose, because there's so much you could have, addressed, right? When you had that conversation, and the questions, and I love that she asked the hard questions, the things that they don't tell you about at church. I mean, how many people, I don't know if you're into apologetics or not, you're very good at delivering it. so I would assume maybe you have a natural gift for delivering it and portraying it. But Answers in Genesis, which are the people that are behind the Ark and the Creation Museum and all that, their founder is Australian. His name is Ken Ham. He's actually a really neat person to listen to speak. And he, because of his upbringing, felt led to build the ark one day. And his big thing was, whenever children are hearing about that story, usually in the book, it's the little boat and the animals are busting out of the boat, and it's hard to see it as history, And so he said, you go to school and they say, oh, let me tell you the history. And then you go to, Sunday school and let me tell you a story. And so these children are hearing it, and then they go to college and people start asking all these questions and they can't answer. They're like, they were told when they were young, like they say, hey, school is saying evolution. How does that resonate? And they're like, that's okay, little Johnny, just believe in Jesus. This is him, how he does his delivering. Just believe in Jesus, you'll be fine. And so they'll attack you. That's his big thing about Genesis 1:1, which is their ministries. It's like, there's an attack on the beginning, and if that attacks the foundation, which is Jesus, doesn't really stand very well. And so I remember when I came across that on PureFlex, and I was like, whoa, I need to learn apologetics. I need to understand, because for me, everybody's different how they've grown up and whether they believe or when they believe or how that goes. In my story, personally, I always kind of knew God very young, but it's because I grew up in a very difficult situation, and that God calls us at different times for different reasons. And so I kind of had that protection, and I just believed. I didn't really ask the questions. I'm not one of those, because we need all kinds. I'm kind of like, okay, that sounds good. And so I'd go learn, evolution. And it's so funny. It wasn't until like years, like I was a grown up, probably maybe with children by that point, when I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't add up. The two conflict. And before I kind of compartmentalized it, right? I learned this here, but I know God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, I know they are real. I hear from them and have that relationship. And so the other thing was just what you do when you're in school, but not everybody's like that. And so they go to college and all that curiosity comes in, and people start asking, like, what about, Buddhism, or what about Wicca? What about all the other things that are out there? And they don't really have that foundation. And so I feel like churches don't teach that. I didn't learn a lot of that stuff until watching some of these shows, and I'm like, oh, like Answers in Genesis things, and as well as some of the stuff that you were doing. And then I read C.S. Lewis, and got super interested in reading Mere Christianity when I even learned about what apologetics was as a grown-up. So I say all of that wondering for you, and I said it didn't start out that way, but I'm guessing, what did it kind of turn into as you saw the response?
What it turned into was like I said, it was the non-believers that said, if I heard it this way, or I always thought this. And what I liked about David Gregory's book, again, I'm not going to take credit for the dialogue or anything like that, because I was adapting a novel, so it had already been written before me, so I take no credit for that anyway. I liked the concise, because the way it transcended from a just close your eyes and believe type story, to me, I thought it was a good debate. And that's why, and that's one of the reasons too, because I'm a stickler for people are a stickler for the truth. And if you can prove, facts and things like that. So what appealed to me about it, and what I found out from the feedback, the people you didn't think were going to respond to it, even atheists. We heard from them. We have heard of literally thousands of people. We made that 2004, so for 18 years we've been getting this kind of feedback. But what appealed to me about the story, and evidently appealed to everybody else, was it didn't just say close your eyes and believe. It's like, it really broke down facts and logic. Like, well, if this is this, then how did this happen, and how did this? And in the book, in the original novel, the character having dinner was not only a man, but it was also like an engineer at a environmental company. So when I adapted it for the screen, I said, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it a woman.
Mhm.
I'm gonna change it from a man to a woman.
Mhm.
And I'm also gonna make the character an attorney,
Mhm.
because I wanted somebody who I wanted to play up the fact, number one, women
Yeah.
are, some women every now and then tend to be argumentative. And
It's true.
attorneys are always, so I thought, who is the most argumentative person in the world besides a 9-year-old is going to be a female attorney. I said, that's classic. It's stereotypical, but I don't care. But I loved in the dialogue how he held up to all of her questions and didn't just say, well, don't ask any questions, just believe it and shut up. He broke it down to where she finally, I know a few things were straw man arguments, but for the most part, everything was, okay, you have no,
Yep.
you drop the argument, which is, the number one thing in debate, don't drop your argument.
Right.
And he never dropped the argument. So I'm big on that. And this is something I never say it out loud because I never talk in church, but something you kept talking about apologetics versus, history and whatnot. It's just, my big thing is like, if I could make, you're supposed to criticize church. If I could criticize one thing in every church I've attended, in the church where, my home church now, is stop saying Bible story.
Yeah.
Stop saying Bible character, because that sounds like fiction.
It's true.
We don't call the Battle of Valley Forge the Valley Forge story. We call it the Battle of, it's a historical account. We don't call George Washington a American character. We call him somebody who actually lived. So I said, so if I could change anything, but it won't change because I never say anything in church, but I would say, drop that vernacular. It was historic. The Bible is historically accurate. It is documented. We know this because there is evidence. Archaeologists, there's evidence. That doesn't get played up enough. And then we wonder, like, why do they think we're saying fairy tales? Like, well, because you're using the word story and character.
It's true. And then you write the thing. Actually, I don't know if you've ever listened to Ken. I would Google it when you have time and see if you can find some of his talks. His name is Ken Ham. And I think you will really enjoy it. I feel like God makes us all different to come together, like a tapestry. We all have our different giftings. What I love about listening to him is he is very aggressive, but in a good way, right? Like the way he does it, it's one of those ways where you're like, yeah. And that's what he talks about. It's like, how are you going to expect somebody to see this as true to fact? And they're going, he calls it Greekifying. He says the schools are Greekifying people now. And they go to Sunday school and they're like, let me tell you a story. And he's like, you can't compete with that, and they get older and then they're just frustrated because no one's answering any of their questions. So I would totally listen to just any of them. Actually, what I love about their ministry is they've got like neuroscientists and physicists and astrophysicists that talk about like the questions that people ask, right? Instead of just saying this is an inconvenient question, we're just going to move you aside or just say you're an unbeliever or label you as a heretic or whatever, right? But he actually has these people like you carbon dating. That's one of the things I love about the ark, as I was like, okay, the ark is built, but now what? Like, is it just a boring place? Like, what is it? And he spends like that whole space is used to talk about these questions. People walk through it and they like, how did you fit all these animals in here? What did you, even to the point, what did you do with, their waste? Where did people eat? How did you keep, they deal with all of those questions to show that this is a real thing that happened, even to the what do you call it? There's accounts of other cultures that talk about some sort of a flood story, and to show that there's a bit of cooperation within it. And so I think that's very brave, and the fact that it's just been blessed because they got it up so quickly. But he actually has talks that he does. They have a whole like center there as a part of where they're at, where different people come and do talks and different things. But what I was saying, but his style is definitely his style, right? Like he'll do the debating. I think him and Bill Nye have gone at it a couple of times. And he's come out and looked at the place. And so I think you definitely need those people who call it out, right? And I think he even goes to church somewhere nearby there. But I think that you're right, that does do us a disservice, using that vernacular and taking away from it as being historical. Because I even noticed it feels weird for me to say it because I'm not used to hearing it, right? We say what we've heard and been fed. And so I have to very purposely say, historical account or history, but it does feel funny because it's not how I was raised, and seeing it that way with all the evidence that's there, and church is a church, and that would be my criticism. And I think you can't criticize church personally, but I think because that's what Jesus did he not? Woe to you. He called it like it was. Like, I'm not that aggressive with it. Like, he makes us all different. I'm more on the gentle side the way I do it. But I've heard so many people who say, I love God, but I don't feel like I'm welcome in the church. I don't feel like that I would be welcome. I feel like I would be talked about. And I'm like, you probably are right, because of, church today has its own culture, right? Its own set of ways that things are done and people accept. And so, not everybody's going to feel welcome in that environment, although your relationship with God has really not a whole lot to do with what people are choosing to do in a building. So, and people don't really know that. And so when we're traveling, and like, I talk a lot about God just because of what he's done in my life. That's just who I am. I just, like, God has done so much for me. So it's in my conversations, and it's neat because people who aren't even believers don't mind me at all. They actually love hearing my stories. And I told me the other day, I'm like a walking anecdote. I'm just always telling stuff by stories because that's just how I see things. But we were in a store one day, and I don't remember what I was talking about. And they're like, oh, what do they say? Are you Christian or those things, which are very loaded terms these days. And I'm like, I'm Team Jesus. He was like, okay, I like that. But it's neat because the guard comes down.
Right. But we're being, and it's getting worse, of course, which is supposed to get worse.
Yeah.
There's more your team, my team.
Yes.
In everything. Yes. Like inside your own house, you have for some my team, your team. And that makes it a little harder as well because immediately you're on the wrong team. And it really does come down. So it kind of makes it hard because again, I think we all have handlers, and the handlers do better when we're like this.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's a big problem. So it really, I think on a big stage, it's getting harder to do because our big stage has got some really scary people on it that you see that claim to represent what we believe. And I think that's a disservice. I always said, it was from a book by a guy named Bob Briner called Roaring Lambs. And I think it was written back in the early 2000s. A friend of mine that is an actress gave it to me a long time ago. She was on Seinfeld, by the way.
Oh.
The cigar store. Did you ever watch Seinfeld?
Oh, I've seen a couple of episodes here and there.
Okay.
But I don't know if I saw that one. I saw the Fair Square episode.
Fair Square, okay. Didn't see the cigar store in. But anyway, she gave me this book by Bob Briner called Roaring Lambs. And the whole gist of the book was the world is not going to get changed by the televangelists and, the people with the big stage and the lights. The people are going to get changed by people like Tony Dungy, people that are admired and strong in their faith. But, they're strong in their faith because they're strong in their faith, not because they're a televangelist or they have a Jesus theme park. Those people are almost doing a disservice sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, an influencer is going to be Tony Dungy. Like, do you follow sports? So because I'm going to use a lot of sports.
No, that's okay. Because I'm going to go back and Google them later. Some of it I do know, but go ahead.
Do you know who Tony Dungy is?
No, but okay. You can tell me.
He played in the NFL. He coached. He's one of the most successful coaches. He coached Tampa Bay. Mm-hmm. And he coached at Indianapolis, went to the Super Bowl,
wow.
beat the Bears. But anyway, he is just this strong man of faith, but he's at the top of his game. He's not, all eyes are not on him because he is a televangelist. All eyes are on him because he's a Hall of Fame football coach.
Right.
But that's
a different point of entry.
Mm-hmm. That is his platform. And the thing that I really started thinking about it in Tony Dungy's case was he has a large family, and his one of his sons, I'm not sure if it's the oldest son or not, committed suicide a few years back, and he was not going to miss that opportunity. And it was a time when everybody said, well, let's see how he, how do you react? Mr. Clean, the churchy guy, why is your own kid committing suicide if you know so much? And that's really the kind of the criticism he got, and he handled it beautifully. I mean, word for word how he handled it. Somebody, I think it may have been my minister, but he may have ripped it off from somebody. He said, God's plan is every time a non-believer gets cancer, he lets a believer get cancer so the world will know the difference.
Yes, the way we handle things is very different.
So that's the eyes on you and stuff. So it's going to be Tony Dungy, and it's going to be you with your podcast that don't, that you're not a televangelist with flashy and with a choir behind stuff. That's what's really going to be up to make changes in the world, the kind of changes we need, not lower gas prices, but getting as many people to heaven as we can, because the world's it's not supposed to get better. We're not supposed to get better gas prices.
That is supposed to get worse. That's true. And I think that's the thing that I have been just prayerful, and how you pray and you ask questions, you're like, God, what's going on? I'm wondering, what's it going to look like, when he talks about we're going to do greater works, right? Greater works than these. We're going to see that. And I spend a lot of time, praying and looking for, direction, or even teachers. One of my favorite teachers, that I know God led me to this teacher when I was going through a lot of stuff, was Derek Prince. I don't know if you've ever heard of or listened to him or not. I highly recommend. He's not even alive anymore. And it's so interesting when you said the people that make the big changes are the ones that you just don't see coming, or the ones that are just kind of like those backdoor people. I'm those people that kind of just slides in the back door, and I'm like, I don't know how I got here, but I'm here. and the guard is down. People aren't they're like, what am I going to do with this person? And that's neuroscience, right? Whenever you get disrupted is whenever you're most open to hearing or receiving what someone is saying, and if they're coming from that place of love, God uses that. And one of my things, actually, we were talking about Dallas earlier, one of the concerns I had for him, and I prayed for that situation, is because he's gotten the attention, right? He's got the stage, something that was considered so humble, and had such a humble beginning. He's like, the Catholic Church wants to see me, and this and that. And I'm like, oh my goodness. That's good, but also that comes with stuff too, and so it's that prayer that God was able to help him and the community stand strong, because the enemy's everywhere, right? And he wants to get in there and just get you off track, even just a little bit.
And knowing him like I do, he is so well equipped. So he's the right man for the job, right time and place, because that's his personality. So he talked about being entrusted with stuff. He raised $11 million on his first outing. It's like, okay, who would you trust with $11 million?
Right.
Dallas Jenkins is one of them. He's worked hard. He was a rich kid, at least for part of his life, because of his dad's success. But he never came off that way, and he never stopped working hard, and he never stopped making a big deal about his failures. He was not a fake book guy that said everything's great. Here's my newsletter. Everything's great. Everything's fantastic.
Oh yes, the highlight reel.
Yeah, he said, "Oh man, things really sucked. I really blew that. Boy, did I mess up?" Dallas is just, he's the right man for the job right now. So
That's awesome. That is so awesome to hear. And I'll just continue in that prayer, because that's such a neat, that whole ministry is such neat, far reaching effects. For sure.
It's really surprised them, because it's not even going out the way they thought it would. They changed horses in the middle as far as the distribution, and it's worked out perfect. It was the right road to take. And if you say, oh, it's great, it's like, okay, if you could wish one thing for the project, what would you wish? I would say Netflix, and just get it into there, because the production quality is there, the writing is there.
It is. You totally could. I wonder what that's about. But Netflix, and I have actually gotten rid of my Netflix subscription, because there's not a lot of good stuff on there. At least it's so much harder to find it like it used to be. They used to have a whole faith and spirituality section that was really easy to find, because we were on Netflix before it was, the thing to do. We got rid of cable back in like 09 or something. And they were starting to build, their stuff. And I think it was before they were making shows themselves and things like that. And so that was great. And then they started changing to the point, like, even if I'm just hovering over something, I'm like, eyes are assaulted. And I'm like, I didn't say to play this. What's going on? So we had to retire, for us personally, had to retire Netflix. But that brings up a question I wanted to ask you. So you guys did that first one in 04, Perfect Stranger, right? I mean, that was before Facebook, and all of the social media stuff. Like, how were people connecting and communicating with you about like their questions and then liking the show? Like, what was that medium of communication?
Oh gosh, now I'm being one of those people. Gosh, how did they? Well, they were email. We had email way back then. You were in grade school, but there was email. So we heard through email, and email. We actually got a lot of letters too. I mean, like letters.
Wow.
That sort of thing. But yeah, through the internet, it was through email. There was no social media, which is fine because I really don't understand social media. A lot of emails. So yeah, that was our prime communication. And then we would see the reviews on Amazon when we were selling there. So
was Amazon I guess, yeah, they were. Wait, were they doing that back then?
They were not streaming, but they were selling DVDs.
That's right, in books. Okay, that was kind of their first thing. Wow. So I know you made another one. I've seen.
It was actually 2000. We started Perfect Stranger in 2004. We got our first deal in 2006. So that was when our actual release was. We started the process in 2004.
Gotcha. Okay. That was right when Facebook was showing up and Amazon was starting to pick up steam.
So it wasn't that long ago.
Right. That's still so, but so much has happened, like with communication and social media. Social media wasn't even a thing really back then. Yeah. And that has so much to do with people their content, their media now, right? It depends so much on that. And so it's neat to see a very, like I said, a very easy to digest message done to just do so well. And I wonder in 06, so when you guys actually kind of went live, you said you had a theatrical run. Like, how did all that work? So I know it's kind of hard to get in the theaters.
It wasn't huge. It was really limited. Again, we didn't really know what we were doing, but we were showing well. And here's the other good thing that happened with that first movie. When I was given the book as a gift, I'd done a stage show and someone had left it in my dressing room one night. I didn't know who left it there. Little book. It was like right up my alley. It was really small. And so it sat around. I had the flu. One time, and so I was laying on the couch and I'd watched ESPN 3 or 4 times rotating. I said, well, when all else fails, read. So I read the book and really liked it. And then, like I said, when the wheels started turning, this would make a good film. I tried to get in touch with the author, which was difficult because he wrote under a pen name and there was no address there. And there was a letter address, there was a mail address, but no email or anything like that. Plus he wrote under a pen name. So it took quite a bit of doing just to locate him, and come to find out he was a guy in Texas that worked for some publishing company. He had written this book kind of as a project, but he was selling it out of his garage. So I met with him down in Dallas. I was doing a stage show down there. I said, well, he was living in Dallas at the time. I said, well, let's get together. Let's talk about this. And so I'm kind of hashing out what I would like to do with your story and how little money I can give you up front. And so we met, and he liked me. He liked what I wanted to do with it, and vice versa and stuff. So, we got the film rights to this book. Well, in the meanwhile, while we were in pre-production and going to make this little story that we were going to sell at the back of a van, a huge publisher picked his book up. Random House picked it up.
Wow.
And did a 200,000 unit first print, which was their largest first print for a first-time author they'd ever done in history. It goes to the New York Times bestseller list, and we're making the movie version. It's the bestseller. It's on the New York Times bestseller list, and we had the movie rights, and the movie is in progress. So it opened a lot of doors for us before we ever printed one frame. It's like, oh, based on the New York Times bestselling novel. Well, it wasn't that way when we started. It was a garage book when we started. But by the time we printed the film, we could say this is based on, and it was setting records as far as, a first time novel and a novel about that subject matter. It was actually championed by a Jewish person at Random House that actually.
Wow. Okay, you're giving me goosebumps. That's amazing.
So that's how that happened. So somebody said, well, what's this story? I said, well, it's based on a New York Times bestseller. So, people that see dollar signs say, well, there's going to be a built-in audience. So yeah, we'll give you a chance. So that got our foot in the door, whereas we wouldn't have had that otherwise.
I was wondering that. That's amazing. Have you written this down somewhere? Behind the.
I just told you. You can tell somebody.
That's just really neat, because I feel like there's so many people who have a story or a message they want to get out, and they get so discouraged because of it's so much harder now, because there's so much more hoops to jump through, so much more stuff, and
so much more stuff. Yeah.
And so
and
hearing that, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's just, it's amazing that, like for me, when I hear that, because for example, I feel like God told me to write a book, but I'm like, who am I to write a book? I don't write, And so when I hear your story, it's like when God puts something in there and that's what he wants to do, he's just going to make it happen. He's going to put all these pieces into place that are just like, how did this happen? Like you said, it was a garage book, which I've never heard that term before, but it's hilarious. I'm going to use it all the time. Garage book. And then it became a New York Times bestseller. Like what? So I mean, those things actually do happen. And I think people hearing that or seeing that when they feel inspired, because remember, where do people go? Whenever you said, how to get the rejection letters, how to, receive the no's, right? But, it's nice to hear, like, what about when you do receive the yeses? How do they come? And I don't personally feel like I hear enough of those kinds of things to just say, God's still moving and anything is possible, and when you just kind of move forward in faith and put yourself around people who are going to support you, which I'm going to ask you that next.
It's like I try to maintain with everybody. It's like none of this was planned. I liked acting. I wanted to see what it was like to direct. I wanted to see what it was like to write a screenplay. I mean, that was all me. I co-directed it with a good friend of mine. And it was actually up in the air who was going to play the role. Because he's an actor as well. He went to SMU, has a degree, and he's a lot better than I am. And we actually flipped a coin. We said, okay, one of us will direct it. One of us will direct, the other one will act. And so basically, I got saddled with acting. He was going to direct, and then I reneged on it. I said, you know what? I want to direct too, so we're going to co-direct. And he was good about that. So I wound up doing both, but that wasn't even a foregone conclusion I was even going to be in. But he would have done a better job than I did. So, and it still worked out. Like I said, it was kind of the story that kind of sold everything. And Pamela sold things too.
That's so cool. So what is your current direction now? So you have this amazing story. You said you didn't really set out to really spread the gospel. And I got to see another one of your movies for the first time. I was like, I probably should watch this. I'm totally into this, the Perfect Stranger movies and the series. Like, you need to make more of those if you're not already told that. Like, I'm like, I need more of that. That'd be great. But I watched some of the other ones, and also you see that God's that component of God's love and speaking to people who feel like they're in dark spaces and don't think that they can be reached, which does a lot of that. And the church doesn't help with that. They're like, you're too bad, to be able to come around us, and not a lot of the truth, which is there's nothing that everybody's in the same boat, and to God it's all the same. It's awesome. Doesn't matter whether you are a murderer or you lie. He has love for everyone, and that's not a message that's really taught. There still is the varying degrees of worse or better, right? That's still there. That the sentiment is still there. Right. And so I just wonder, and I noticed that's a lot of in your messaging in the series, it's there, which is great. And so I guess, where are you headed with your messaging, or what is your goal if you have one? I know you seem like you're kind of just going with the flow, right? You're like, pull the oars in and just see I'm like that too. I'm a leaf, right? Where does the wind blow in me? But I guess, is there anything that you're wanting to do here going forward with the way of the world and where it's going?
We never really thought when we made the first movie, I always say, well, we just kind of do it. I like to portray that Lebowski type thing. Yeah, whatever's cool, man. But two things happened when we made that first movie. I had just watched a movie at Blockbuster. Somebody said, "Well, here's a churchy movie that's in Blockbuster," and it was terrible. Oh my God, terrible! It was awful. And I remember I said this to my friend, my co-director. I said, "We could at least do this bad." I didn't know what we were going to do, but I always say, "We could do at least this bad."
And they're in Blockbuster.
No wonder the world thinks we're idiots, because it was just not good. And I said, we can at least do this bad. So I thought, and then the other thing was, I thought that as far as the messaging, that, the way the book explained how you get into heaven, how, what this is all about, what is relationship? How do you have a relationship? Explain that.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this, why is this this faith is what, no one comes to the Father except through me? What's that all about?
Yeah.
I thought I did a good job of that. And there was no other movies out there that did it, because, the King of Kings didn't do that. The Jesus and that was darn right scary. The Passion didn't really do it. The Passion was so much, it didn't focus on the explanation book. And I thought no film has been well done and been an explanation book, as far as it goes. And I thought that script, the novel, did that perfectly. So I really felt like we were filling a need there. I said, we're creating something that does not exist right now. Well, since then, there's been a flood. You said, the Pureflix came out with their own I Met Jesus series and stuff after that. And so it's going to be a flood. But at the time, that did not exist. And so we made a few more movies in that series, because we thought there were a little bit deeper explanations that this character could make in different settings. And then we did the series of the 7 episodes. But on top of that, as far as a direction we have, and this is always going to be my direction, is good entertainment that's well acted, that has a good message, that is not churchy and does not have to take place inside a pew or with somebody trying to save the church, and let's hold a big show to save the church. And
I know there's a lot of those.
It's Christianity Hallmark, as far
or even exactly, even like the romance ones. I was like, why? Like, Hallmark's already got kind of a thing on that. Like, I don't want to see that. And and I was gonna say, like, the ones that I've seen, like yours is my favorite because of that, because it's dealing with real stuff. So like the one that, and I'm thinking it's Pure, because the guy who made Pureflix acts in some of the movies, or the second movie. But because there's 2 movies and then there's a series they have. And this is before I even saw yours. It actually made me like looking for more. I'd love to see more Jesus-based stuff, especially when I was going through things. And so what I liked about theirs was it was very a touchy-feely warm, right? Jesus is loving and he's great, and so that's always nice to see. But when you're starving, you'll take anything. so you're getting that. But then as they kept going, the messaging was just, it felt different. And I encourage you, if you want to check it out to see, if you notice that. It's the encounter. So there's an encounter, the first one, which was good, and then the encounter, the second one, which was got a very actiony, and then there was a series they did that, some things there and there. So it was good. Then I saw yours, right, and I was like, what is this? Because I was wanting to just take in everything, and I think I saw the series before I saw the movies. And it was just, it was sweet. And it wasn't just the warmth, right? He knows everything about you, which feels really good to be known, right? Feels great, and cared for. But then, like you said, it answered the questions, right? That a lot of people have. And it didn't, the ones that I've seen, in my opinion, didn't get into it like that. Like, where you feel like that part of you that's inquisitive, that part of you that wonders, that, because God made us very inquisitive, very creative, for a reason, and it didn't address that need, and the church doesn't. You ask the church question and it's just like, don't worry about that. or let's focus on coffee and worship music and let's all be like Hillsong. I've seen that actually. I have had to leave a couple of churches, and that's big for me because I'm the non-confrontational, peaceful person, and we've gotten alienated a couple of times. And I was like, God, do you just not want me in church?
Yeah, you're not getting fed, right? On the series, back to that, on the 7 episode thing we did, we had done Isaac at Trinity Broadcasting, which I don't agree everything with Trinity Broadcasting, but they were putting our stuff on,
right,
and being very, very nice to us. So they had great success with our first movie. They said it had set records as far as viewership went. And so they came to me. I was still out in California, and they said, we've got an idea. We want you to do a series based on the movie. I said, well, how am I going to do that? And they said, we will underwrite it. You write it and produce it. We think it would be great if you did like a half hour every week and meet in a different restaurant, like a truck stop one time and like a picnic table the next. And I said, that sounds awful, Isaac. Terrible. So I said, I don't think so. So I went back to my hotel. I said, somebody's giving you a blank check to do basically, anything. So I said, I went back to him. I said, how about we do this? How about we do episodes based on actual accounts from the 4 Gospels, and we modernize them? How about we do that instead of going to a truck stop? And he liked the idea and something about it. And we get asked about this all the time. We get asked about how do I find more episodes? Because there's only 7. They said, where's season 2? And I said, there's not one. And they said, are there any more episodes? I said, no, there's only 7. And the story behind that is they gave us, and again, they were underwriting this whole thing, which meant everything was paid for and we were very well taken care of. They gave us a 20 episode order on it, which means our budget times 20 episodes, which was nice. And I said, we can't go much past 7. And I just said, we won't be able to keep it fresh. And at some point in time, I'm going to be putting words in Jesus' mouth that I don't feel comfortable with. So I said, I can handle 7 stories and keep it very relevant and keep it very gospel specific. I said, but if I get up to 20 episodes, I'm going to have Jesus in an astronaut suit, or I didn't want to turn him into Barney or touch, where he appears, or Aladdin or something like that. I said, that's what's going to happen if we go much past this number of episodes. So, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm being honest. I mean, we walked away from a lot of income and revenue because I just said it wouldn't be true to the material. It really wouldn't be true to what I'm trying to get across here. So, but we were fine with, and they were fine with it. They didn't tell us to get out of here or anything like that. So they stuck with the 7 episodes.
Wow, that's an interesting part. I would have not guessed that, but that makes sense though. I think that it's true. It's when it comes to these things, it can very easily go in a wrong direction if we're not careful. And I think
and a respect thing is like, okay, he's not a genie. He's not Michael Landon in Highway to Heaven. He's he's the human God that walked on earth, and so I said, I'm nervous about it as it is. If we go much past 7 episodes, I'm going to be really nervous about what I'm saying here, because not want to put words in his mouth because his words were very distinct and they're very short. The Gospels are very short as far as his actual account. So I just didn't feel comfortable with that. So just because you mentioned the series,
I was curious about that. So I was trying to ask that question, like, where's the rest of? Are you going to make any more?
So beyond that, we have, I guess our movies kind of go, we've done 12 up to date, and they kind of go in a couple of categories. And I say the ones like The Perfect Stranger, which are very message heavy and really promote a lot of questioning and answering. The other thing is what I call our Mayberry entertainment. Are you familiar with the Andy Griffith Show?
I am. I actually have watched a lot of those.
Okay. He cracks me up. Me, everybody's, because I don't like the term Christian movie. It just makes my skin crawl a little bit. But anyway, nobody ever called the Andy Griffith Show a good, it's Christian television. they called it good television. And you had moral people, you had a strong sense of justice, you had a strong sense of family, you had, you know, God-fearing people. And, you know, you had all the elements that people say, oh, well, that's a Christian movie. And I was like, no, they didn't call it Christian. They just called it good entertainment that reinforced, you know,
the values,
moral human spirit. So that's what our other films are about. It's like, okay, it may not take you back to saving the old church bell by having a concert, but the people in our other stories, apart from the perfect strangers, you know, the people are aligned with a perfect sense of justice. Of course, they don't curse, they keep all their clothes on, you know. There's nobody's getting their head blown off, no caps in it. But we're telling good stories and try to be as close to human, you know, realism as possible, like people you can relate to. But at the same time, we're doing good storytelling according to these laws and these rules and you know, these guidelines and stuff. So that's kind of, so our movies kind of fit two different categories.
No, that's awesome. One of the things I have been looking for, and I actually tweeted the creator of Pureflix, as a, you know, kind of, let me position this to you. I think he just kind of liked it and move along. But one thing I would love to see, especially now that I have children, and you know, we'll go to the library. We don't even go to the fiction section anymore. We just stick in nonfiction. We get books about space and about nature. And even when it comes to like how they do evolution, it's everywhere. But we have to look through these books. And even like we homeschool, right? And so we'll, you know, get them these, you know, books that they're learning. You think it's safe, right? But you go through and we're working on them. Like, why are they posing everything from such a negative perspective? Like, oh, you hate Brussels sprouts. I'm like, we don't hate Brussels sprouts. We like Brussels sprouts, but children are so impressionable. But anyway, point is after going through that a bunch, I remember thinking about it, praying about it, and even talking about it to my partner. And I was like, you know, that would be really great if there was some sort of a media company or somebody, some production, I mean, that just really put out media that, you know, was categorized for the different age groups where they were at, or different messaging. Because if you've noticed, like, our poor children, they don't even watch TV right now. We just cannot do it, because they always approach it from, it's already a problem, right? So our children aren't afraid of the dark. They're not all of that stuff, because we're like, you teach that, right? Like by positioning it, how do they know to be afraid of the dark? They might want you to turn the light on, but that doesn't, you know, you see what I mean? But if you start saying, oh, are you afraid? Oh, well, yeah, I guess that's what's going on. I've just imprinted that on them. And so we tried prayerfully to do that in a different way. And so I'm like, when we want to bring in media or things, that lessons and teaching them, a lot of that stuff it leads, you know, and it leads in ways that's not very helpful, rather than just teach them the concept. You know, and even some of the Christian shows and the things, Christian shows and those things, like they'll have a couple of characters that are kind of, you know, what is the word? Disrespectful to adults, or they speak and say things that I wouldn't want my children to say. So it's like, what do you do?
I mean, I'm an old movie, you know, I'm an old movie, and mainly because you didn't have to wade through, you know, language and whatnot. So I learned to appreciate from a very early age. I learned to clean humor, not corny humor, good humor.
I know exactly what you mean.
Curse words. I mean, I was a big fan of the Marx Brothers. It was like very clever comedy.
Yeah.
You know, the old movies, the love stories and stuff. And I just think it could be done. So, you know, we took on, you know, breast cancer in a movie, and it was very much of a love story. And, you know, somebody actually said, well, they've lost their way. I'm like, you know, you know, they're not making good Christian movies. I said, well, I never said we were making Christian movies. I said, we're making independent films that reflect our worldview, you know. So we took on that, you know, we took on a comedy, and we did a documentary a couple of years ago that was not about saving the old church bell to put on we actually made a documentary about the national anthem.
Cool.
And it was not political at all. But it was a human story about human determination. So yeah, you know, we just think there's a place for good entertainment that doesn't insult your intelligence. And that's kind of the challenge now. When we first started out, we thought there was no entertainment that presented the gospel in an intelligent way that would not make people feel like they're being talked down to. So that was a need back then, but that's not so much of a need now. There's a really crowded space right now. I think
I don't know. There still may be a need. Like, I love the apologetics flair. I haven't seen that. Like, C.S. Lewis, like I loved how simple his books and the way even he talked about it, the way he talked about himself as it was, as he was explaining it. It's just, it's very down to earth. So your homework, should you choose to accept it, I'd love for you to check out Derek Prince, if you've not checked him out. His teachings, you can go on YouTube and just put in Derek Prince, not Joseph Prince, completely different person. Derek Prince, his story is phenomenal. And I know God led me to his messaging because before that, I had no experience with practical application of biblical truth. And the way he teaches it is, it's, I mean, literal. Like, and I'm like, and it's one of those things you see it and you just kind of have a shift. And you're like, how did I not see this? And a good example of this, he was talking about God has not given us over to a spirit of fear. And he was really good with languages. And so he actually understood Hebrew and Greek and all of that. And so one of the things he would go and say is that, you know, when you're reading the original, it actually is talking about a literal spirit of fear. Like he calls it person without body. And I'm like, huh, you know, that, you know, when you're being attacked or whenever you're going through something, that it's not just a concept, which is how I used to think about it before, you know, but you're coming against actual things. And he would go, you know, very biblical based, and I'd never heard it taught. And he, you know, because he was going to be like a tenured professor in Oxford, and I mean, he's been around for a while. He passed away, I think, in the early 2000s, but had a very long ministry. God just used him. He said no to that to say yes to what God was calling him to do. He was in the military and talked about how he was, God had an encounter with him there, and, you know, so he was going to be a teacher. He was going to use all that knowledge because he said he got into Eastern stuff, and he was a yogi for a while, and the philosophers really, his thing was truth, right? Searching for truth. And then God kind of got a hold of him, and he studied all of that and then found that this is where it's at, and then began teaching it in a way people could digest and understand it. That was his big thing. And he would say that if people ever came into him and said that was so profound, and he was like, well, what did I do wrong? It's not supposed to be profound. It's supposed to be extremely simple. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. Point. Yeah.
So I think you'll enjoy his teachings.
Derek Prince. When I Google, yeah, Purple Rain. Sure, Purple Rain's gonna be stuck in my head next. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe I'll get Lola out. Get Lola out of your head. Yeah. But one of the things that I saw, and it's so neat how God will like take charge of your education when someone does it. So like I was raised, you know, it's a very difficult environment, but God kind of took over a lot of my upbringing in a lot of ways, the way he would show me or lead me to different things. And when I started listening to or watching Derek Prince's teachings, there's so many of them. And before that, you know, the regular teachers, right? There were some Priscilla Shire, or, you know, there's the big teachers that people go and listen to. They go and fill a whole like stadium or concert or whatever hall to listen to these people who teach. They're not necessarily preachers, but they'll like teach, they'll write books. You know what I'm talking about, right? That whole kind of stuff. So it's really in these days, especially with the, you know, the women's ministry and stuff. And and so that was kind of where I was at, right? Like, oh my goodness, I can't wait till they get another book out. And when I started, when God kind of got a hold of me with this new teaching, and I started realizing that, and it's also for a lot of these women, they would go to these what do you call them, teachings, whatever you want to call it. They'd go spend money to go, and they filled this huge hall, listen to them, and they're like, it's like they were feeling good, right? They're feeling really good, and then they'd leave and feel worse than when they got there, you know, because they really weren't being fed anything, and nothing they could take with them, you know. It was all like, yeah. And so listening to him, and I tell people, one of the big things I learned when I started listening to him, and even when I went to my first spirit-filled church that didn't feel weird, and I was like, it's like you realize you've been eating gruel your whole life, but you didn't know, you thought that was what it was, and then you get steak, and you're like, what have they been feeding me? I was being barely sustained, and I just like, that is missing. And people, you know, it's like the difference, I think is what God showed me when I saw his teachings, is a lot of these teachers, and I'm not necessarily speaking badly about them, they probably don't even mean to be doing it, but they're getting in the way, I feel like, of God's glory, or God's, who, you know, who God is. And so they're taking all that adulation and praise, even though they don't realize, like, I'm doing God's work, but the message, the feel, whatever it is, it comes through, like you receive it as you're eating something, someone's serving you food. And if it's coming from the person and not directly, like you're not just a vessel, that's going to translate. And I didn't realize that until I heard someone who literally, there was no agenda. Like, it felt clean. It felt like there was nothing in the way of the message. It was just the message. Take it, use it, forget about me, my name, whatever, and build. That's kind of what it felt like. And so I love, like, your show, for example, your movies. I got that same feeling even listening to that. It wasn't like, look at what I've accomplished and who I am and what I've done. And like I said, I don't think people mean to do that. I think it's just kind of a natural bend that can happen sometimes. Like, I just saw The Case for Heaven. The guy, Lee Strobel, I think that's his name. He does a lot of The Case for, and I saw the movie adaptation about his, his story, which is an amazing story. And then he's been making a lot of different The Case for documentaries, and I just saw The Case for Heaven. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there was some good stuff here. The near-death experiences was good, but at the end of it, I was like, why do I feel like this was just about them and their experiences a bit? And although it was good, it was really good, and I even brought the tears. Doesn't take much to make me cry, especially when it comes to stuff like that. I'm like, this is so great. But at the end of it, it was like, I felt this is more about man a bit than about God working through man. Right. I don't know. What
you know the difference, especially somebody like you with trained ears and trained eyes. You know the difference when you encounter somebody like that. When you encounter a televangelist kind of guy, and when you encounter a legitimate spirit-filled person. Because when we think spirit-filled person, we think hands in air, and we think tambourines and scary stuff and tongues. But really, a spirit-filled person is. It's not like that. It's like somebody that really is emulating Jesus, and you see what drew people to him when he was just a man. And I've encountered people like that in my life, and that's I don't say, wow, I wish I could be like Jimmy Swagger. I'll encounter these people. It was several years ago before we moved to Louisville. It was a guy at a car dealership, and I could have spent hours with this guy, just the way he talked, the way he phrased, the way, his faith was not something he did on Sunday. And he kept saying that. He said, you don't think I'm trying to do this to get your business, do you? I said, no, I'm not getting into it. But it was such a natural flow that came out of him. It wasn't something like, well, I'm going to talk churchy to this guy now. It's like, no, this was him. And he was an admirable, good looking guy who was very successful. I think he owned the dealership. And you can see such a difference between those people and the people that work at it and have the 1-800 number down in front of their name.
Yeah, that's a good way of
the
putting
difference,
it.
And I think everybody responds. They can tell the difference, and they're just neat. And it's the tone again. You got me this whole list of names I have to look at here. All this I forgot how to pronounce your name here. I actually wrote it down. I've got phonetically. And Tony Dungy, he's an incredible witness without being an incredible witness,
Exactly. That's how Jesus was, though, right? He didn't come in and say, look at me and look at this and all that. He just showed. I tell this a lot to my non-believer friends, and I forget how it even comes up, because I'm very much just a walking vessel, I suppose. I don't really think about what I'm going to do before I do it. Even when I do podcasts, I tell people, I'm like, I don't really know what's going to happen. I just kind of pray about it, and then I let God lead at that point. And I said, like I said to everybody, and everybody I guess they deal with me. They don't mind me, I guess. But one of the things I love telling, because I struggled a lot with understanding what evangelism means, right? Because I grew up, I knew God very young. I had a very personal relationship with him without anybody teaching me. It was just natural. But understanding how to have relationships with people was very difficult for me. And I'm one of those, like I said, we're made all different. You have the ones that God makes, like C.S. Lewis or like Ken Ham or like you, and I'm kind of the person next to that kind of shows up in the back door, and I'm like, I don't know how I got here. It's my first day, and just kind of goes with it. And that the Great Commission, go and make disciples, go and spread the gospel. And I'm like, Lord, I will do that. I don't see myself on a soapbox. This is how my dialogue would go with God. I don't see myself on a soapbox, but I'm gonna need your help to show me what that means. And over time, the way he showed me was through the story of Zacchaeus. I didn't even know that story until my children went to Sunday school one day and came back and told me the story, and I looked it up. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is evangelism. You just show up, invite yourself to dinner. I'm coming to have dinner at your house. And you just let Jesus, the Holy Spirit, do the whole thing and just hang out. And so I tell people that who have trouble with that or are not believers. And I said, just go and love on people. You don't have to go and tell them whatever. God will do that. He does all of that, whether that's through you or through how they're convicted or whatever. And Jesus himself, he didn't go and tell Zacchaeus, you're a sinner and you're this and you're all these things. He just said, right then, he was a celebrity, right? So he was like, everybody wanted him around. He shows up and he picks out this guy hanging out in the tree, and says, I'm inviting myself to your house to eat. I'll be there whenever. That's whatever time it was. And everybody's like, what? Don't they know who he is? He gets all this attention. And that's all he really said until after he was convicted internally and said, I'm going to completely do this whole thing. And then Jesus speaks and says, today salvation's come to you. And I was like, I could do that. I can go invite myself to dinner and party and love on people all day long and let the Holy Spirit do the rest.
And I've had to navigate. I'm not gifted like you. I'm a textbook introvert. So I've had to navigate it a different way than that. So that's but no, I mean, so yeah, so I would find it difficult to like say I'm coming to your, I'm coming to your house. I'm like, oh wow, can I just mail you? Can I mail you something? So really, and I think like I said, I'm not some messenger, but I think the way we presented the message has kind of been, if I could do it, I would play it this way, So it's kind of
I have a question. I have to ask you this kind of blatantly, or not blatant, bluntly. So how are you an introvert and you like make movies and you put yourself out there for everybody to see?
It's different. There is a script, and of course I didn't graduate college, so I don't have this great insight. Plus, I don't really like talking about myself. I was a very unhappy child. I was my appearance, everything I did, every friends, I was painfully shy. I faked sleep for the first 6 years of my life. My extended family thought I had narcolepsy because I was always asleep, but I would fake sleep so I wouldn't talk to anybody. And I really got used to that. But as far as performing, it's almost like an out of body type thing, as long as Yul Brynner said the same thing. It's like, he would say when Yul Brynner was doing The King and I, and he was just this huge presence and stuff. And someone said one time, well, Mr. Brenner's, the senator, is here to see the performance tonight. He'd like to come talk to you at intermission. And Yul Brynner said, no, I don't have a script. I don't know what to say to him. This is this great man. So I'm not comparing myself to Yul Brynner, but I don't really consider it being out there. It's not the same thing as making a speech. It's a very closed environment. I know what I'm going to say because it's all written down for me. And I can't be humiliated because I'm usually the writer too. So so if it's a matter of that, it's like, yeah, I want everybody to see our pictures and stuff. I just happen to be in it. But as far as in a room, it's like, I cannot find a corner fast enough of 2 or 3 more people. I'm not comfortable. I'm not confident or anything like that. So I guess it's like an out of body experience. Like when I'm working, that's not me. I'm this other character. I'm this other person and stuff.
No, that makes sense. You kind of, and sometimes, and I feel like where God makes it so multifaceted, because people will meet me and they'll think, like I would say I was shy when I was younger, but I had a very abusive home life growing up, and I think that can mess with how you show up in front of people. And God just did something with me. I don't know, where I just jump out there. But a lot of times it's very similar to what you describe it, where I don't really think about it. No, there's no script. Sometimes I don't know what I'm going to say to a person, but I'm like, well, I'll just show up and see what happens. And then things just start happening. God just takes over. And speaking, actually, I started public speaking. And like I said, I would have never thought, like, I'm kind of like you in the way to where I'm fine backing people up. I'm fine being in the background. Like, I'm totally fine with that, supporting you. You can take all the credit, like I'm good, right? That's fine for me. But God has seen fit, he'll do that to you, to put you in front of people. And the first time he did that in a ministry role, which I never thought I'd be in ministry in any form, although we're supposed to all be, but just never saw myself that way. When I was asked to get involved with Mothers of Preschoolers, which is, I don't know if you've heard of them, and it's a international organization, and they have chapters that people will start, and it supports moms with little ones before they get to school. And it's a really good, it's like a backdoor ministry because they don't really push the faith, which is one of the things I like about it, but they will usually partner with the church. But people who don't go to the church, people who are wherever, will come. And lots of times people find their faith in being there because of the support they get. Because when you're a new mom, they have a dad version too, but when you're a new mom, if you're at home with the child, all that stuff, you need a support system for this whole new situation. And so I'd heard about it, never been in it, didn't even do anything with it. It was not on my schedule. And they asked me if I would do it. And my first answer would have been no. But God was like, had been working on me. And I had just heard a sermon that said, it's not me time, it's God's time. so I was like, okay, I'll consider it. It was at the perfect wrong time, all of it. I had like 3 very tiny children, and it was on like at night because it was from working moms. And so that would have been during their bedtime. It was just all a mess. But I said, okay, Lord, I'll do it. And I I come in, I end up becoming the coordinator of the group after a mass exodus just had happened with that organization. And so I was essentially running, yes, on a skeleton crew. I said, God, what am I here for? And he said, I was there to love on the moms. Like I was going to end up in politics, which I cannot stand politics. I tend to steer clear. I'm good at politics, but I don't like politics. And so he was like, you're there to love on these women. And I wasn't dealing with unbelievers. This is when I was going through my very difficult, like spiritual awakening. I don't know what you call it, but it was very hard, very, very hard season. And he called me into that and said that I was going to be dealing with women who were believers, but struggling with fear, and fear in a really bad, very kind of paralyzing way. And then a lot of believers, a lot of Christians struggle with that. I think it's normal. And that's something that I did not, well, I understand it now because during that season I was in, he allowed me to experience fear that I had never experienced before. And I had, like I said, I've gone through some things, but he always protected me and filtered me from it. And he said, this is how people feel all the time. And they're believers and they're very, very just fearful. They're just waiting until the next attack or bad thing happens. And that's not how they're supposed to be living. So he said, I'm supposed to support these women, these moms. I said, okay. So I show up there, I end up coordinating the whole group. And I walk up there and I get on stage and I'm like, I just heard about MOPS like 5 minutes ago. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I just kind of walked in the back door. So y'all bear with me. But they all found that very charming because, of me just kind of showing up like that. And I'm like, this is not my stage. This is y'all's stage. So if y'all have something you want to say or if you want to speak, please let me know. And some of the more senior members did not care for that very much because I kind of shook everything up. They don't like that at all. And so I spent the year loving on the women, that God protected them, but I dealt with a lot of church trauma from dealing with that. And I ended up leaving the church after that. But I bring all that up saying, I'm very similar to like, God just kind of puts me there and I just kind of do whatever I'm supposed to do. And then kind of, excuse myself to, whatever I need to do to kind of refill and refuel.
Yeah. And I really have, that's just, I guess you call that part of my journey is seeing how I fit into that. And I'm still not sure, sometimes.
I would have never seen, when you said introvert, I have to say personally, and I'm speaking to you like we're old friends. So normally I probably wouldn't say this, but, but I don't really like the terms introvert and extrovert, because I feel like I've seen people who can be all the things, right? And just various circumstances, depending on the environment, the person, what they're going through in life. And I'm a stranger, or I was at least before you came on here, and you did not seem shy to me at all, not even a little bit.
No,
not even a little bit.
That was nice of you to say.
It's the truth.
People make that assumption when you're in this business, and they just think, and especially they think, oh, he's going to have all his personality and this, we'll invite him to this. It's like, boy, are they disappointed when I show up and, I'm barely making eye contact. It's just, I just never stop being that kid, that just isn't comfortable around people and stuff. But like I said, I have a really good friend. She's an actress, and she's been in a few of our films. We've got to be really good friends. Beautiful girl. She's just drop dead gorgeous. And we had done some commercial work back when I was an actor and stuff. And then, a few years later, we started Kelly's Filmworks. And I said, well, let's bring Patty in. I really want to use her now. I'm going to look her up. She said, I used to see you on those shoots, and I just thought you were the most arrogant, SOB that was ever. She said, you never talked to anybody. She said, you never even came to craft services and stuff. You would go, during lunch breaks, you would be missed. I said, how long have you been stalking, making notes? She told all these, do you remember the shoot? Oh, down it. Do you remember this shoot? I'm like, Patty, did you not have a hobby?
Just watching you.
She said, I know. She says, now I know. I try to look back on that. And I said, well, yeah, unfortunately, I've never been a dig me type person, so I'm not going to walk out and say, okay, guys, I'm not talking to anybody because I'm shy, not because I think I'm better than you. I'm painfully shy, and I'm always going to be that way. So thanks very much.
That's your PSA, or maybe you should put it on a shirt.
My PSA. And it really has to be hard because especially in a worship setting and stuff, I'm really private about that. And I'm not a big fan of stand up and greet your neighbor. In fact, I mean, here's me as like at this point in my life and stuff. I sit there with a little bit of dread, knowing, okay, at any second now they're going to say stand up and greet your neighbor. And it's like, my palms get sweaty. So this has turned into like a psychology show about me here. So
no, this is really interesting. Like I have a lot of conversations with people. And people say a lot of the same stuff, and it's people you would never think. And I'm just like, one for you, what my sense is that I get from you, and I actually didn't know what to expect. I was actually very excited to just hear about the thought processes and what led you to do those things. It's really cool. And like I said, I would have never even thought that at all. But, when you were saying that she noticed you, like some people just carry a presence, whether you kind of want to or not. God just highlights you, and you just stand out to people, and then they come over and you're like, why are you coming over here?
Well, I don't think it was that.
I don't know. I think you might carry a presence. You
just have to know Patty. Yeah. I don't think it was that. So, but it's worked out. And like I said, it took a long time before it was like, okay, it's okay to be. I mean, introverts have been really overlooked for a while.
Agreed.
Because I've got a niece who grew up very, very shy and stuff, and I used to feel for her so bad because everybody was saying, "Hey, come talk to everybody, come talk to everybody." And I remember thinking back to myself, "Oh my gosh, I always wanted to kill myself when they made me do that." I just want to say, leave her alone. I mean, she's you're doing more damage. But
yes, that's true.
And it's like, can you serve God in a meaningful way this way if you are not out there and you're not a center stage type person? So that's kind of, that's something I'm still always wondering about.
Well, and look at what you're doing now. So obviously the answer is yes, because, I remember I was saying he makes different people, different stuff within the tapestry, right? You got the people like Ken Ham who will you need those that will call you out on national television and not have any problem with that. And he does it in a way that I could not do that. That's just not how I am. That would make me nervous. Like you were saying, like I could not, like knowing something and then just calling someone out, I don't feel good about it. Personally. That's just not where I'm at. That's not how I've been built, but I've been built to do the things that I do this different, just as you've been built to do the things that you do. And look at what you're already doing. You said you're on 12 films now?
I think we're working on one. I think we're working on number 12 right now.
That is awesome. And I love hearing, and I don't know if you have a place. I'm one of those people that watches something and I'm on Wikipedia or online looking up like their studio or backgrounds because it makes you curious, about who they are. And what I like about y'all's mission is that it's not about Christian entertainment. I think that's very smart. That's the way. I think it's just about, intelligent entertainment that you're not going to have to be like closing your eyes or closing your ears or worried about somebody hearing something, but that they can, get a good message from or something that's relatable when you're in a sea of so much junk that is out there to essentially, corrupt or to change your mind or indoctrinate you or program you or whatever. And that's really comforting.
Yeah, and it really it does. It seeps into your conscience and stuff. So I think there could be more. There needs to be more. And I want to see something that's written as well as Breaking Bad, and is just as intriguing but okay, can you do it without this? And and would somebody say, oh, no, it's
Exactly.
impossible to do it that way? But nobody's trying to, because there's no need to.
And back, like you said, the older films, I got into older films because actually that's one of the reasons why I started watching Andy Griffith, was because I was like, all of the newer stuff is getting worse and worse. And because you're just going along with it, you become a bit, you don't notice it, right? You're so used to it that as it gets worse.
It gets to be second nature. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And so I kind of backtracked. I was like, stop the presses. I gotta clear out the noise. And I started going back to some of the older things where they didn't have to try so hard. It was just good acting and good storytelling, relatable. They didn't have to, it didn't have to be super bloody or super, gory or visually, stimulating or whatever in order to get your point across. And to me, I think that that's what's missing now in a lot of the current programming, is that the messaging is not good. The writing is not really good, but they are just blasting people with images.
And that's a lot what Dallas is doing with The Chosen. He's getting as close to meeting all those requirements as there is. And that's why I think he could take on a broader audience, but I don't think Netflix. I think he's on Amazon Prime in some way,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
but I don't think Netflix would take him on. Even though it would help their subscription. They wouldn't need any other faith programming if they just had The Chosen. And I think he's already at a point. So. But I know what he's up against too, so I'm not too, I know what he's up against. I know that he'd like to be there as well. But
can I ask you a question? It's definitely one of those, and you could totally say you don't want to answer it, but one of the things I'm curious about is someone who's in the industry and having your belief system. You hear, like I've not ever been in there, so it's just more hearsay for me, but when you run into situations like, for example, the Trinity Broadcast Network in your experience, where they were able to put your stuff out there, but there were things about them you didn't agree with. How do you find that balance with, I'm okay with working with you guys, even though I disagree, to, you know what, I don't think I can work with you guys?
Yeah, I would like to say something noble here, but I don't want to be insincere. They made us a big offer, so they got our attention. It wasn't our first choice because, and to be totally honest with you, I was prejudiced against them, but I never really prejudice means I'm making my judgment without knowing everything.
Right.
I had seen bits and pieces. I had never sat and watched any Trinity programming for a while.
Right.
I think there has been, Trinity is huge, and there's things in there that I'm sure I am adamantly against that they're doing. But I would find that I could say the same thing about my church.
Right.
And
right.
I bet I can find one person in here who's beating his wife if I look hard.
Yeah.
And I can do that in my own family. I can, again, I can say, I can find one person in his family who's beating his wife. But I'm not trying to rationalize, but if it had been, some, we wouldn't have sold to a satanic network. Okay?
Right.
How much they gave us. But at the same time, we're to entertain and enlighten. That was our mission. So even if somebody had said, well, do you have any reservations about working with Trinity? I'm like, but people that watch Trinity need to hear our messages.
Hear it too.
So we're not going to overlook them just because some things are just a little creepy and some things are a little, further than I would. But Jan Crouch was actually a very sweet woman. The lady with the pink hair. She was actually very sweet. And I worked mainly with her son when we were out there, and he was as nice as could be to me. They're really nice people. They just they came off very flashy.
Right. And that just might be the culture that they need to fit into too. So you just really, never really know.
There's things I would do different, but they would also probably look at me and say, there's things that you're doing things wrong too. You're doing creepy things too. So, we didn't have any problem with that, but at the same time, we were looking to get distribution. So I'm not going to be too noble here. But we have not done a lot of litmus testing since we've been doing this. We have, there's a studio that's made a lot more money than us with faith-based things. And I remember seeing an interview from the producers way back when, and they said, well, we will not hire any crew or actor who is not a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was the worst thing I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
But I can see why. You don't want to have to worry about what your people are out doing at night and stuff. No, we never had that litmus test when we hired people. So I know we have hired non-believers. I know we have had people from alternate lifestyles than ours. No, I think that's about as far as it goes. But they've never had a problem with us. So we always, and like I said, we would actually even have prayer on set for whatever reason. We didn't do it every 5 minutes. Before meals, start working like that. We never did. We never gave a big speech about if you were uncomfortable with this, you may leave, or you have to join in, or you're not getting. We never did that. We would just pray. We said, we made no speeches. That's how unencumbered we were by it. We said, we're doing our thing. You've read the script, you know what we're talking about, and you're still here. So we take it you're fine with us.
Right. No, that's
we really like that approach better than a litmus test. And it's like, okay, and people, I think that some of the people that we got through to with our message were the people we hired that were getting the gospel through their script, through what they were working. So we never took that part out of it. So and like I said, a lot of them, I don't want to call them, but a lot of people who had different life choices than we did, they wanted to come back and work for us. So it's like, well, but that's, I think we accomplished our mission there as employers that, Jesus sat with the sinners, but he didn't sin with them. And, so from that approach, I feel, that I like our approach as far as that. It's not being an exclusionary thing, because sometimes, the person next to you needs to hear the message you're telling as much as the guy 500 miles away. So
I totally, and that comes through your what you create, your content. It really does, it comes through that, because even hearing you talk about it, it's so neat to hear you talk about it, and then the feel that was there in experiencing and watching it, and how it is congruent, right? It doesn't feel stuffy. It doesn't feel, even the things you dealt with, right? It felt like anybody's welcome, right? Anybody's welcome here to be part. And that is very much the model that Jesus had set. And I really appreciate you answering that, because one of the things that I wonder, because like I said, I can't speak from that place because I'm not making those decisions, right? And that's got to be, can be hard, right? When you have everything that you're trying to work for to get your message out there in front of you, someone's willing to believe in your project, but are there compromises, and what do you do and make it? I would assume prayer is a big part of those decisions, because God can, if God says do it, even if it was a bunch of Satanists or whatever, then he's going to pave that way for you to do it and make that path. And so I just need to hear a perspective of someone who's in the industry, who's making those decisions, and also seeing the ministry component of it. I mean, there's a gospel component or spreading of the gospel component in just interacting and spreading your message through the work and the art and what you're creating as well. And I think that's really neat to just hear about, and for anybody. And I always kind of pray over these podcasts when we do them, and I love how we're doing this. Like I said, I would never know how it's going to go, but we just roll with it. and just as a side anecdote, funny story, is, the way I know when God is really behind it is kind of the feedback. I remember the first time I did it, I'm kind of like you in this way, where I would have never done a podcast, totally not in my realm of things I would ever do. Actually, when I was very, very little, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to graduate from Harvard. I was going to speak all the languages and work for the UN. That was my thing. and God was like, no, something else. Although the language thing is still there. Other things, he has me doing so many other things. But the story I was going to say is, I when I was going through this spiritual difficulty, when God was using it to kind of wake me up to do more, he's like, you're kind of falling asleep and you're not out there like you should be. And I was going through kind of a difficult season in my marriage, and it was very rough, and also had little ones, which were great. That part God has really helped me with, but it was a very rough season. And I just felt this feeling I need to start writing and journaling. I never wrote, I never journaled. I'm like, that's not for me. No, but I was in such a weird place. I just needed to get out of my head, and writing was able to allow me to do that. And then I got this this, what is it? I started doing coaching. I started doing executive coaching as a coach and learning how to do that. And I was, researching different kinds of programs to get into. And one particular day I was going to have a meeting with someone who was going to, talk about their program. I wanted to cancel that meeting because I was having a really bad day. And I just wanted to just be done. And I remember before I took that call, I was going to cancel it. And I was talking to my husband at the time. And I said, I just want to opt out. I just want to take my ball and go home. Like, I'm done. I'm just done. And so I get on the call and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get on the call. I'm going to take how I'm feeling into the conversation we're going to have and just be honest about it. So I tell her that, and she's like, well, what do you want to opt out of? And I'm like, well, I don't want to my children to be in this environment or this or what. I just laid it out. And she's like, well, it sounds like you're already doing all of those things. And I'm like, well, then what next? She's like, maybe you need to give utterance to it, like put it out there. And I'm like, out there, like where? Like podcasts. I'm like, podcasts? Who wants to hear me talk? and so I kind of let it sit and prayed about it. I was like, okay, Lord, okay, we'll try it. We'll see. And so we got, a couple of things, equipment. We actually had gone on our first long road trip in 2018 is when this happened. And and I finally said, okay, I'm ready. It was like New Year's Eve, like literally going into New Year's Day. Like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna record this, and we're gonna see what happens. And no, I recorded it a couple weeks before that. But in New Year's Eve, I was like, I'm ready to just put it out there and see what happens. So what I did was I texted it to some friends, and I said, okay, guys, be honest. Like, what do you think? And I sent it, and it was not scripted. I just even went in there saying, I don't know what this is I'm gonna do here. This is what this is coming from, and just start talking. I don't even remember what I said even right now as I'm talking to you about this. And I got so much good feedback. They're like, oh my goodness, your voice is so relaxing, or wow, what you were saying is so relatable to what I'm going through right now. And one of them was like, I'm not even the believer. And they're like, but your voice is so relaxing. And so I'm like, okay, God, thank you for being gentle with me. I'll do it. And after that, a lot of the feedback, and I haven't really done any major like marketing for it. I just put it out there and put it in a few places, and people have been finding it. And when I do hear from people, they'll say, this is really like relatable. And a really funny part was I was somewhere and it started playing on my podcast, and I hadn't started playing. It just showed up one of my recordings. So I was like, well, I didn't put this on here. Maybe I'm supposed to listen to it. So I started listening to it, and I helped myself. So, I didn't even remember what I was talking about. So anyway.
You never listened to that. Wow.
No, I don't. I just put them out there and I leave it, and then and don't go back to it. And someone else produces it for me. That time, I was listening to it and I helped myself. So I'm like, God must be behind it.
That's right. How long have you been doing it now then?
Since 2018. So I'm bad on counting years these days. So is that 3, 4?
That's 4. Yeah, your math is as good as mine. Yeah, 4 years.
Off and on, and it's not even like weekly because you have all these rules, right? Do it this much, do it this much, and I'm like, God, I don't have time for that. Like, you tell me when you want me to do it, and so every so often I'll just get this feeling like you need to do this. Like last Easter, I got this feeling like I don't see myself as any kind of ministry person, but God will say or do, and I'll do it. And I did one on Easter, and that was the first time I ever gave any sort of sermon type thing, but I just kind of started talking, and I felt like God said he wanted me to do it because Easter, I don't know if you got to listen to any of my previous ones or not, but the image I found for it was like a bunny and an egg looking at a cross. That was like, what is that? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, this is the problem.
That's what you preached about. Wow.
Yeah, more just the story. You should listen to it. Like I just said, God speaks. It was just more the beginning to the end story. And God has used a lot of media. Yours has been one of them, like the way you explained, Andrews and Genesis. VeggieTales creators. Have you ever met them or come across them? The VeggieTales people?
I've been in the same room with them. That's as close as I got, but yeah, I'm very familiar with VeggieTales.
So Phil Vischer, one of the creators, he has the most neatest, and it's for children, but I learned so much from it. It's called What's in the Bible. And it deals literally Bible from front to back. And I don't remember how many episodes they did it in, but it very well explains it from beginning to end, and it interconnects it with what they call, the rescue plan, and they laid it out. And I watched that, and that was a huge part of my understanding of the whole story. And I'd never understood it fully. I had pieces, and so how can I tell somebody else if I don't understand? Like, I believe it, but I don't understand how to explain it.
Yeah. VeggieTales was ahead of its time, almost.
Yes. And then people got a hold of it, apparently. Like, I think someone bought it, and Phil Vischer, I follow his tweets, and he's actually very funny, just naturally, just
Oh yeah,
funny.
yeah.
And they were asking him
humor to make vegetables.
Yeah.
I mean, just he was a visionary, so he had to have a sense of humor.
Yes, and I think he voiced every single character on that show that he made, the What's in the Bible. Yes, that's very talented. And then he's kind of there as the correspondent who speaks, kind of almost giving the story as all of the interacting characters he creates interact with him, and they're puppets, a puppet show. But if you're interested to see it, I highly recommend it, because it's probably explained it for me in the best way, in the most common elements, to really be able to understand it and be able to relate it to someone else. I have not ever been able to do that before. And I think the most neuroscience magic that you would say happened in all those teachings was the one about Jesus. Because everybody kind of expects to hear something they've already heard before. But the way he did it is he built upon kind of Jesus's ministry. And what I had never heard anything about before was the kingdom of heaven. Like, he says it a lot, but I've never really had anybody explain to me what that even means. You just kind of assume. I've always kind of fill in the gaps, right? Oh, he's talking about heaven, right? But I didn't really get it. And so in his explanation, he kind of goes through first and just lays out Jesus's life, right? He healed people, the whole political behind it, the Pharisees and Sadducees. I didn't get that either, why they had issue with it. And then up to, the death and resurrection. And then he goes back and says, all the things that he did on earth were to show us what it would be like when we're in heaven, the perfect world. And so now you don't have to worry about death, because he can bring people back to life. You don't have to worry about sickness, because he can heal that. You don't have to worry about being hungry or sad, because he can fix all that and allow us here to experience it here, to plant that seed, to look for it there, and also to convert, almost like terraforming, right? That seeds that he made to change our world now to be more like that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that makes sense. And so I'd never had that explained before, even though he says it a lot, right? The kingdom of heaven is light, the kingdom of heaven is light, and I mean,
we glossed so much gets glossed over. Yeah, just so much get glossed over, stuff like that, and you pick up, like I said, you were talking earlier, way back when you were talking about the culture, the church, whether we fall into a culture and we get away from what it's based on, and the culture becomes the things in itself. Heaven is one of those things that gets mentioned rarely, gets broken down, like what's, why we want to go there. But yeah, it's just things that we just don't think about enough. It's like again, the simplicity gets overlooked so easily, because we never talk about the goal. We never talk. I mean, that's
true. It's true. So your church. So how's your experience been, kind of at your home church? Because we kind of stopped going because of our situation, but we visit from time to time. Different ones.
Well, here's one thing. Despite what I just told you about my love of crowds and things, we attend the 5th largest church in the country here in Louisville.
Wow.
So it is a mega church. We've been going there ever since we moved here. Mm-hmm. So that's been 20 something years.
Wow.
Having said that, in all honesty, since we're doing the Dr. Oz show today, the bad thing that happened was during the government lockdown, when we were all watching online. Well, that's how an introvert goes to church. So it has been a real, struggle, a word over you. It's been a real struggle to voluntarily go back to having, stand up and greet your neighbor. Mm-hmm. I'm working through that right now. I'm way too content watching and stuff. So that's where I am right now. It's always been a little bit big for me.
Mhm.
So that's really my person. I'm like I said, I am not. I was a more worshipful person, I think, in Poland when I couldn't understand the language than I am here for some reason. Um, so it's, it's a Bible-based church. It's a truth-telling church. It's not
Mhm.
affiliated with any national. It's a Christian church.
Mhm.
It's a good place. It has a lot of programs and stuff. My
Mhm.
wife actually goes to one of the satellite churches.
Mhm.
She's better than me. She does the in-person thing, and she
Mhm.
goes to one of the satellites of it where they actually, I don't know if you know how those work. Like there's
They're
like a
very
main,
interesting.
it's a main church, and like the message comes on screen, like it's streamed into the church,
Mhm.
but everything up to that point is that, and that's not my favorite either.
Yeah.
You know,
It's strange. I've
I'm
been to one and they had like a glass come out of the floor. And then they put the pastor's image on there for the message. It's in Dallas. There's a bunch of big ones there. So it was almost like a hologram. But it seemed
oh,
like he
okay,
was
yeah.
standing there. And I was like, this is
I know it's,
weird.
yeah, I know it's a creative way, and you get out more places. So maybe I'm too old fashioned for something like that.
I
Like I
don't know.
said,
I agree with you. I like the house church movement kind of thing.
yeah, oh, well, yeah. And I'm still trying to, there's a rebellious part of me that could, because it was just thumped into my brain as a child, like you show up in church whether you like it or not, and that's what church was there for. You never wanted to go, but you had to.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if that was a design plan. So again, I do a lot of rationalizing because I don't like really. I really don't like human interaction all that much, especially, so
Mhm.
why
On
why do
large
you
scale.
why do you go to a church that has 20,000 people in it? So that's the other question.
Well, a
Uh,
lot of times they make it easier. Sometimes you can feel a lot more anonymous when you're in a bigger group, right? You're not going to stand out as much.
you know what? It's a little bit hard for me. And again, I'm not, we did a large scale passion play there for several years.
Mhm.
Um, like it was huge. It was like Broadway, like people would literally come from across the country, and it ran for 2 weeks every Easter, and it had gone on for several years. It was really, um, like I said, it was Broadway scale. It was not a church basement ideal. It was huge. It was
Right.
moving stages and a cast
Wow.
of thousands. It was a big production, and I played the main role for 6 years.
Wow.
And again, it was totally by accident. The guy that had played Jesus up to that point, who everybody, they literally worshiped this guy. He quit all of a sudden, and 1 year it was getting very late in the year, and they said we're not going to be able to have the production this year. I mean, like, we're talking like 60,000 people
Yeah.
piling in to see this, and they said we're probably not going to have it this year. So they knew I was a professional actor, and they came to me and said, kind of that way, because they were looking for somebody to do it. So I kind of fell backwards into it, but it was very successful and stuff. Um, so it's kind of hard for me since that time. Plus, I'm on television and stuff. It's kind of hard for me to seep into the background. Sometimes,
Well, no, and now you're a celebrity there because you acted in the play 6 years, right? They know you.
and a lot of people grew up, like a lot of, it was like a lot of families would take part
Mhm.
in the production and stuff. It was a real gift to the world and stuff. But everybody's really chatty and stuff. So sometimes it's just not.
It's interesting. It's like you get pulled into it, but then it works out.
It did, yeah, it did work. It was a great mystery. So I was sorry that they quit having it and
Was it because
whatnot.
of 2020, all that stuff?
No, it ended long before that. Actually, somebody played the part after I did. That they just kind of made some change. They thought they needed to modernize it and whatnot,
Oh.
and because it kind of started out with, it went from birth to crucifixion to resurrection and stuff was the timeline of the passion play.
Mhm.
But then they started modernizing it. It just kind of lost its way. And they ended it after a while. So
That tends to happen. So another question I did want to ask you, and I don't know how we are on time. Let me know if I'm getting long-winded on you here. But I did have one more question I would love your opinion on, especially kind of hearing your perspective from going online, and it does make it so much more convenient when you can attend church online. But at the time when everything started in 2020 for us, we were actually traveling. and that's kind of where God had us. It was not planned, right? We had already started traveling in 2019, and we were still in the midst of that on into 2020. And we were in Missouri, and then we ended up in South Dakota. I had a coaching client who wanted me to come and consult on some stuff in South Dakota. And so that's whenever the hints, like we were starting to hear about it, but I don't watch the news or any of that. So I didn't know what was going on. And then we ended up back in Missouri. And I think not long before we left there, they locked it down. And so we were moving around when everything was kind of locking down, but God just had it where we were never really stranded anywhere. So as much as it was going on, it didn't impact us in the same way. Like our children actually still don't really know about it. We kind of just kept them oblivious to it. They noticed the masks and we're like, yeah, people were kind of choosing to wear masks, but we really didn't even have to wear any, and they didn't really even have to wear any because we kind of already bottled them up a bit anyway. Especially indoor stuff, but we didn't really need to because we were just from where we were at. But my question goes is, well, the weirdest thing for me, we were in, I think, Nashville. This is when I was going to try to find a publisher and get my book published, which I found one. and I talked to him directly, and I'm like, I have no agent or anybody. This would be a very strange call for you, but so we were there, and I remember feeling the need to sit in a church. I'm like, I don't need to go to service, but I just want to go sit in a church, just sit there, and just feel God's presence. Although they can be anywhere, but I just really had this strong need, and they had this beautiful Methodist church. It was a Catholic church there in downtown Nashville. And I remember I went to the Methodist church in this huge, beautiful building. I think it was built in the 1800s or something. And the doors were just locked. And I was like, something about this just doesn't feel right. So I messaged. They were locked. I could not get in the church.
There's a message. Okay.
I was locked out of the church. And so I texted our message. I emailed them. I'm like, is there any way I could come in and pray? No, we're closed. We don't know we're going to open again. This was, I think, like maybe June or July of 2020. And I'm like, I just can't come in and just pray. Something. No, we're online. We don't know when we're going to open back up again. It's like, okay. So the only place I could go was a Catholic church, which is also very beautiful, but also different. So God has different ways of how he has sensitized us to things, right? Or how our senses and what we pick up on. And for me, and I've always been like this since I was a little girl, I can sense things like darkness, things like that. Like my hands will get hot or I'll feel very uncomfortable. And I don't even know if I've ever been. No, that's not true. I think I was in a Catholic church at least once when I used to do wedding planning events and stuff. And but we went and sat in because they were open, like, yeah, you can come sit in. I think they were practicing choir or something. I'm like, we can go sit in a church somewhere. So we go, and Catholic churches are beautiful. Like they're just, they make them very pleasant to look at. So we're sitting there and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at stuff on the walls and, sad that, I have to, fight so hard to be sitting in a church somewhere. And then we went, and I think maybe it was the confessional. I don't know. So I'm not very super familiar with the Catholic dynamic, but we were walking towards an area and it was really pretty. And I just got this feeling like, turn around and go back. So we didn't end up going there. So although I got to sit in the church, I didn't feel super at home.
Oh, wow.
In that church. So
wow.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of sad because during the earlier, parts of human society, especially after Jesus, I feel like that's where people would go, during sickness and plagues and things, people turned, to churches. That's where they would go pray, or that's where they would go and find, something. Those were always open. And I remember those churches that tried to stay open got a lot of negative feedback from their governors because of how integrated now they're into 501c3s and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So got me thinking about a lot of that, like how that's so connected. And so a church is not independent really anymore to be able to, do whatever they feel like God's calling them to do. And I'm not saying all of them should have done that. I just remember there were some that didn't want to close their doors and wanted to find some kind of way to make it work. And they were getting a lot of pressure from local government because that person was getting pressure from the higher governments and such. So I tell a long story. I'm curious what your experience, what your thought process is in that, with that shift and change of the church, when the church is not supposed to be afraid and all these pastors and everybody at home, not out there even outside, but everybody's kind of hiding and afraid.
I'm reminded constantly, the church buildings, again, we're talking the modern, the church,
Yeah.
church buildings, church leadership, church decision makers, pastors, the lady that answers the door, the person in charge of locking up, they are all imperfect humans. And that's what they're made of. And that's what they're always going to be made of. So, when there's not a united front on something like that, I don't tend to think, oh, this is a concerted failing or anything like that. They're humans, and I think we're getting into a place now to where we don't quite see them because, like I said, when a televangelist would get caught with his secretary, it would make frontline news. We're kind of at a place now. There's still some, but we're really not putting people on those pedestals anymore, and wisely so. We're getting away from that type of corporate worship where that kind of thing can happen, to where somebody can have that kind of a moral liability. But what I think we are seeing is more of a, like you said, the home church thing. That's taking a lot more root, and I think that's good for the movement because it doesn't make any dramatic misconceptions about, well, the church is holy and untouchable. You don't need guys like that. The church is just more people like you. And so, when something like that, that stunk, that politics really got its ugly head inside those church doors and stuff. But it was that church was run by humans, who do watch the news and are scared and were afraid for their families and think they were doing, Jesus said to us, Jesus said to respect authority, give Caesar what is Caesar's. And a lot of people were doing that. So, I don't fault anybody because, you've heard the phrase fog of war. I think all of us have been in the fog of war for a couple of years. And again, it goes back to, I think we all have handlers that don't have our best interests. And so I think in the fog of war, so I'm not going to fault somebody that was doing what they were told. And, so yeah, and I don't think there's any lasting repercussions from that. So,
right. No, I think that's a good point.
If somebody's got an unfit heart for ministry, it's usually going to get found out some other way. So,
right.
But somebody just made a mistake.
Perfect sense.
Somebody just made a mistake or something like that. Yeah, they're gonna recover. They're gonna get back on track. But yeah, it's the less we listen to the handlers, the better. That's what I learned.
Right. Yes, I think that's such a good point, though. It definitely, and God uses all things. I think it's great that there's more of the smaller, and the house church movement has grown a lot from this what's been going on. I think for me, what hurt my heart, or my thought was, when all this was happening was, for example, I actually gave a really great example earlier when you said what was his name? I need to write his name down. The coach that
Tony Dungy.
Tony Dungy. When you said that, like, after his son, had committed suicide, and everybody's watching him, like, what's he gonna do now? Where is his faith going? Everybody's watching and waiting to see what he's gonna do. And I think that's a great example of kind of my thought then, was that, they're looking and seeing like, what is the Christian, I'm very loose with that term because what has come of it, but what's the Christian community going to do now, right? Where is their God now? Look, they're like us over here, afraid of, just like we are. What makes them or what they have any more than what we have, what we worship or don't worship or whatever, if they're afraid of death, which is supposed to be the big thing, right? About following Jesus, is that you don't have to be afraid. Not saying that bad things. I love that movie. I just watched the Clancy movie yesterday. That bad things are going to happen, but doesn't mean you have to be miserable, right? And I'm like, that's my life. Oh my goodness.
You're quoting
yes.
films now. Wow.
I know. Well, that was the one. That was a good one because that's how I've always been. Always like, as I had a very abusive situation, and people, when I got older, would say, "Well, very similar to your dialogue." Like, wait, didn't you say your mom this? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but you're excited she's coming to visit you? And I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't understand. And I'm like, Jesus, that's what it is. But but yes, that was the part that kind of hurt my heart a bit about it, is because, you know, the best part of following Jesus is you don't have to be afraid, you know, and so I don't feel like people got to hear that. And so a lot of people were so scared. And I mean, seriously, like people who know God would just, and that hurts, you know, just to feel like that. They feel like you're kind of cowering at home and not sure what's going to happen and afraid for your family and your children. And no one should have to feel that way. And so I felt real sad that, that a lot of people, beautiful, robust people, were just like stripped, you know, and so that definitely
Wrong
hurt
place,
my
wrong
heart.
time.
Huh? Say it again.
Wrong place, wrong time. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think, but you know, it's an example though, right? You know, and I think that God will use that in some way, you know, to people come out even stronger than ever, right?
Don't worship other men. That's never going to work out. We encountered that with a minister that was really close to us not too long ago, and we had to make some strong decisions about, okay, we had him on a pedestal and that's on us, you know.
Right. Sometimes you don't realize it, right, until things happen, and then you're like,
right. Well, you think he can do no wrong. He sets a standard, and you're emulating him, and then you know he does this, and you're thinking, okay, we worshipped him. That's on us.
Right.
Just
I know that feeling. And God's had to get on me because I don't. It's like you don't intend on it. Like you don't mean to be doing it. But I remember for me, because I know it was churches. Like I always assumed church would be safe, right? Like, oh, I find a church, I go there, hide in the church, it's great, and then I get hurt by the church, and I'm like, why am I getting hurt? And I remember God spoke to me. There's no safe place but me, you know, and the place that's great tomorrow might not be great the next time you go, because that's just not the way it is. And that was a hard lesson to learn. But yes, I know I've been just bending your ear for over 2 hours now, but this has been so great.
Tell me before we get off here, tell me what languages you speak.
More or less. Some are better than others. So English, and then Spanish was what I went to next. And then in college, I picked up German, French, Italian, and Portuguese. And as a family, we've been learning Hebrew. So even my little 1.5-year-old can say, "Oh."
Are you able? Are you fluent? Are you?
I am fluent in German. I lived there for about 6 months, but not because I was speaking German. It's funny. I spoke a lot of English there, but I got used to speaking. I got comfortable. My grammar was horrible though. And so I'd say German, probably. Spanish used to be more fluent, and then the German kind of got in there, and they compete with each other. French used to be good. So it's one of those that it would be if I need to spend more time doing speaking them, but God has given me an affinity. He actually reminded me when I went through my awakening, or whatever you want to call it, or I call it the wilderness season I was in, where he's like, I gave you a gift for languages. I love people. I love all the people. and I love communicating with people. And so one of my favorite scenes from your movie was all the languages you were speaking. And I'm like, yes, I want that to be me. Jesus, help me speak all the languages.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that. Yeah, I'm fluent in nothing but English, but I pick up, I can mimic really, really well.
And then when you were speaking that, I was like, he's got to have a gift for languages. And I think that means something. And you know, they say it's supernatural.
I've had really good teachers. I've had really good teachers that have taught me inflections and whatnot. Yeah, I've never been, like I said, not fluent in anything else. I just do pieces and phrasing.
But I bet if you were submerged, you would have no trouble.
Maybe. I really don't know. You know, because every place I've ever been in Europe, they were speaking English, so I had no reason. Yeah. Why did you pick up Italian?
So it's funny you say that. So I remember I was going to be a lawyer. That was my plan, but I did not want to study government. I did not want to study any of that. And I remember a lawyer told me when I was still in high school that you can study whatever you want when you go into college. And my goal, and it still is my goal now, is I wanted to speak all the languages that was ever possible. And I would love to work for the United Nations, or in some way, you know, be able to help or communicate with the world. And so I started with Italian. I think it was my first one in college, because I felt like it was close to Spanish and it would be easier. And I know I was very good at Spanish. And then I always like loved the idea of French. French was very hard until it just got easy one day.
Right.
And then German was really hard in a lot of ways. It was just a whole different uh, structure in your mouth, right? The way that linguistically it's very different from the Latin-based languages. And so that had to get kind of used, but I'm good at mimicking too. I have a gift. That's what I was going to say. You probably have a gift for languages too, because I notice people like me tend to be able to mimic dialect. And what I've been meaning to, I'll pick up somebody's dialect and
Yeah,
be careful not to do that, not to offend anybody, but I naturally mimic what people are doing, and I can hear. It's not called perfect pitch. I don't know what the name of it is, but I can hear a sound, whether that's a sound or someone speaking, and I can do it. Right. You know, pretty exactly. And other people who like languages do the same. They're able to do the same thing. And so then I picked, and then I did Portuguese because it just was logical, because they had an accelerated Brazilian Portuguese program for Spanish speakers. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't have to take as many hours of classes because they'll give me the accelerated version. So I had this whole plan, because there was no language program at UT at the time. And so I was literally taking like 20 hours of languages for the first two and a half years, probably, or 2 years of college, because it was the first 2 or 5 hours. And then the second 2 or 3 hours. And then you get into the upper division where you do more stuff. And so when I went to Germany, which was supposed to be France, that was my original plan. And it wasn't even through the school. It was like, I woke up one day, I got a bunch of LSAT books, because I remember I was going to be a lawyer. And I was going through them, and I feel like God kind of had a moment. He talks to me. Usually it's not audible. I've had like one audible encounter with him, maybe 2. But this was just kind of in my spirit almost, and I could hear him, and he kind of showed me what my life would be like if I was a lawyer. I'd be very, very good at it, but I wouldn't necessarily have a family. I probably wouldn't like some of the compromises I needed to make, and that's not really where he wanted me to go. So I was like, okay, because I'm usually not very argumentative. That's kind of my style. I'm like, okay. So I just took my LSAT books back to the library, and I'm like, well, what now? And I'm like, well, if I don't take myself out of the country, I don't think I'll get able to go. So I'm like, I'm just going to figure it out and take a break from school and go. So I started researching online, like, what do I need? What credentials do I need? And then I was like, well, I'll go to France. So I'm looking, this was in 2004. And so I was looking at the list of countries, and I was going to pick France. Like, that's the link I want to pick, but the link didn't work. So I'm like, okay, EFG, Germany. Well, if that works, that's where I'll go. Where do I go? Well, the only country or only city I know about is Berlin, so I'll just go there. so I pretty much paved that path. I packed my dog with me, and we didn't know where we were going to stay. I didn't know anybody there. I just picked a hotel room for like 2 days and said, I'll figure it out when I get there.
Wow.
And I went, and I ended up, I did have a friend who did speak German. He lived, somebody I used to date actually, but he lived in a different part of the country. And he called around and found a realtor, or whatever you'd call them there. So he met me at one of the places. I'm checking out the hotel today. I have to find a place today. That's just my feeling. I have to find a place today. So I'm like, I don't care what it is. I'll just take it. And so he meets me in front, and I've got my dog in a bag on one end, and my backpack and my suitcases. And he's like, you're Canisier. And I'm like, yes. He's like, I thought so. So we walk up like a bunch of flights of stairs to look at the place. And he's like, I don't think this place is for you. And I'm like, no, it probably isn't. And so he took me, and usually I don't go with strangers, but I felt like he seemed kind of safe. So he took me to his office with all my stuff, where his business partner, another female, which I was glad to see, and they looked up all their available listings and found me the perfect place. It was on the ground level, which apparently is cheaper there, because my dog, needed to go outside and everything. And it was very inexpensive. And he took me there, helped me unload my stuff, and then he took me for a glass of wine. So I got a place to stay. And then I'm like, okay, now I need a job. I don't have a visa, but I need a job. So I walked by, was a bar, like 2 houses down from where I was. And the guy was standing out there, and I was like, so I need a job. I just got here. I live right over there. And he said, well, come back later. And then his partner, she was there. And he was like, yeah, come back, you're hired, whatever. And then she was like, if anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're my sister. It's like, okay. And I pretty much got a job there that week. And then he helped me find resale shops to find to furnish my place because I didn't have anything there to sleep on or do. And so I found a place and got stuff.
Wow.
And then was there for about 6 months. Didn't know how long I was going to be there. I just woke up one day and I was like, okay, it's time to go home.
Germany, of all places. Wow.
I know. I know, but yes. And so that was a very interesting thing that I did. And I guess that kind of tells you a little bit of my personality. Of sometimes I just jump into things. But you know, it was cool as I knew I was supposed to be there because her name was Jennifer, the other person who owned that place. She didn't like me at first. I think that there were situations with her and that guy, the partner there. And although I don't know about it, I can pick up on something's not right. And so I kind of made a point to really show her that I wasn't a threat at all. And then towards the end, and there they just keep drinking at the bars. They just keep on drinking. Like you start at 6 and they're there at 6 in the morning, still going. So we were there at 6 in the morning.
Really? Are you serious?
Yes. They just keep drinking. I don't know how they do it. And so I was talking to her that morning. People were still there. People were coming in even. And she said she felt like I was an angel sent by God there. And she had kind of been asleep and having a hard time and felt like she was kind of awakening back to herself. I was like 21. I was very young.
What a nice story.
Yeah. So yes, me and languages. I want to speak all of them. That's the goal.
You got a good start. All right. Well, I'm gonna get back to editing. If you don't need anything else with me.
This has been great. We should do this more often just for fun.
No, it should be fun. Yeah, especially when you traipse back through Kentucky sometime.
Thank you so much for joining us on Opting Out, guys. So glad you're here. So glad you came here whenever it was. You were meant to be here. Know that you are meant to be here wherever you are. You are not some accident waiting to happen, as one of my favorite teachers, Derek Prince, says. We hope you will join us again. Hope you were able to receive something enriching for you or something you want to pass along or whatever, something that you found valuable for you where you're at in your life. That being said, we hope to see you back here again soon. Feel free to reach out if you have any sort of communication questions, you want to be a guest or whatever that is, however you are moved, feel free to reach out. And we will see you again next time on Opting Out.